In Canada, beaver trapping had been the chief source of pelts for the fur trade, so much so that the Hudson's Bay Company was founded with the sole intent of trading beaver fur, which was particularly profitable from the 17th to the 19th century. At the peak of fur sales, about 100,000 beaver pelts were shipped to Europe per year, and predictably, the American beaver faced complete eradication by the late 19th century. Its effectives went from an estimated 60 million to fewer than 100,000 individuals in under 300 years. Thanks to a change in European fashion preference from felt to silk, as well as the rise of the beaver conservation movement in the 1920s, which involved increased legal protection and reintroduction, America's favorite engineering rodent avoided extinction, and its populations have since rebounded. Let me give you a glimpse at its essential ecological role as a keystone species. Well, it's simply one on which the survival of many other species depends, and whose activities disproportionately affect its ecosystem. Frequently mentioned examples include the sea otter, the African elephant, and, you guessed it, the American beaver. By building dams across river channels and feeding on specific plants, beavers not only affect their ecosystem, they inadvertently engineer it, hence their designation as ecosystem engineers. The American beaver is one of a few species capable of altering not only biotic or biological, but abiotic processes like hydrology. To conserve resources, an American beaver family builds its dam at the narrowest point of a river channel, which is, coincidentally, where sediment discharge and water flow are at their fastest. Thus, a beaver dam tends to significantly reduce the kinetic load and velocity of a water course, essentially by converting that kinetic load into potential load or potential energy, then slowly released downstream. Also, considerable amounts of both organic and inorganic sediments accumulate at the bottom of the pond that forms above the dam, which helps reduce downstream turbidity and retain within the channel nutrients that would otherwise be lost to erosion. Reduced downstream turbidity favors fish that require clean gravel to spawn, like salmons. Additionally, because a beaver pond is exposed to lots of direct sunlight after its resident beavers fell the surrounding trees, it enjoys a higher temperature than the channel that feeds it. This, in combination with its relatively deep water and rich vegetation, make it prime habitat for mud minnows and northern pikes, among other fish, which are often more abundant in beaver ponds than nearby water bodies. By greatly increasing a river channel's water reserves, consecutive dams allow it to flow even during droughts when it would otherwise completely evaporate. Additionally, they prevent any major fluctuations in the watercourse's velocity, since any acceleration that occurs past one dam is soon negated by the next. Ultimately, a river channel with one or multiple beaver dams favors more species than an undammed channel. Organic matter deposits at the bottom of a beaver pond supply nutrients to lentic invertebrates like freshwater mussels and dragonfly larvae, not present in fast-moving parts of the channel. While lowitt invertebrates like caddisfly and mayfly larvae are displaced by the channel's impoundment, they persist just downstream of the dam or dams. So overall, beavers increase the invertebrate diversity of their ecosystem. These critters attract countless insectivorous birds, bats, and amphibians, which in turn attract predatory animals. Clearly, a beaver pond and dam hold immense ecological value. The American beaver is a generalist herbivore that feeds on leaves, bark, and shoots of woody vegetation, plus various aquatic and terrestrial herbaceous plants. Contrary to common belief, it does not consume wood, except to file down its ever-growing teeth. By targeting easily digestible plants like willows, alders, and poplars, beavers heavily influence the makeup of riparian vegetation. Now, while these plants enjoy a higher growth rate in the short term, which is a common response to herbivory, beavers can eventually eliminate them from their foraging zones. When heavily harvested, poplars in particular produced more distasteful phenolic compounds to deter the rodents, ensuring their survival and recovery once the beavers have migrated. By felling mature trees, the American beaver creates valuable canopy gaps that favor early successional plants, like those mentioned earlier, willows, alders, and poplars, and increase the productivity of those avoided by the rodent. In boreal forests, beavers encourage conifer regeneration by eliminating faster-growing plants that compete with their saplings for light and nutritional resources. The overarching result is patches of habitat where the natural successional cycle is accelerated and others where it is reverted. Interestingly, alders have a symbiotic relationship with the nitrogen-fixing bacteria Frankia alni that converts atmospheric dinitrogen into bioavailable ammonia in exchange for sugars produced by the alders through photosynthesis. Since Frankia alni's nitrogen fixation relies on anaerobic conditions, it is favored by the reduction in dissolved oxygen associated with beaver ponds. Conversely, anaerobic conditions encourage denitrification by other bacteria that converts nitrates into atmospheric dinitrogen, thus completing the nitrogen cycle and preventing the eutrophication of waterways that often occurs as nitrogen-rich fertilizers trickle into them. Following dam construction, aquatic plants quickly establish themselves in the newly formed pond. Their diversity tends to stabilize at around 75% that of nearby permanent water bodies, like lakes, then slightly decline as they compete for light and suffer herbivory, for example by moose, whose summer diet includes vast amounts of aquatic vegetation. As the pond drains, open water, mudflats, wet meadows, and dry meadows coexist within the previously flooded area, giving rise to a rich, multi-layered habitat that is usually characteristic of larger ecosystems. Without beavers recolonizing the site after complete drainage of the pond, it transforms either into an open meadow dominated by grasses and sedges, or a shrubby swamp dominated by shrubs like alders, spiraeas, viburnums, and hollies, all of which offer extensive food and cover to wildlife. Also, beaver meadows remain at an early successional stage, much longer than other ecosystems, providing a stronghold for species rarely found elsewhere that are easily outcompeted by woody plants. So, what did you learn from this video? That the American beaver is both a keystone species and an ecosystem engineer, that it slows rivers and creates biodiverse ponds with its dams, and that its foraging activities influence the plant communities that surround them. Since this species is currently expanding into anthropogenic environments across Canada, it becomes increasingly important for you and me to better our understanding of its ecology, so that we can advocate for sustainable management methods when beavers do happen to conflict with human interests. While I have yet to discuss the incredible benefits of beaver lodges and canals to other wildlife, it is obvious to me, and hopefully to you as well now, that this industrious rodent deserves its spot on the Canadian nickel.